The air was thick. It was always thick in Vegas, a mix of expensive perfume, stale cigarette smoke, and the faint electric hum of money changing hands. Outside, it was a desert. Inside the International Hotel, it was a different world. A world built on a schedule. Shows started on time. Shows ended on time. Every minute was calculated. Every dollar was counted. And at the center of it all was Elvis. This was 1970. The comeback was complete. The black leather of '68 had been traded for white jumpsuits. He wasn't the boy who shook his hips on TV anymore. He was a king in his own kingdom. A Vegas king. The shows were a machine. A powerful, well-oiled, beautiful machine. The orchestra would swell, the lights would blast, and he would appear. A living god for a 2-hour slot twice a night. The set list was tight, it was a weapon, it started with an explosion, and rarely let up. He'd hit them with the old rock and roll. The songs that made him famous. Then he'd slow it down, break their hearts with a ballad. He'd joke with the crowd, he'd throw scarves, he'd do his karate moves. Every beat, every note, every bead of sweat felt planned. It had to be. This wasn't some club gig, this was the biggest show in the world. Rehearsals were intense. The band, the TCB band, was the best in the business. These were not weekend warriors, they were virtuosos. James Burton on lead guitar, a legend who could make his Fender sound like anything he wanted. Ronnie Tutt on drums, a powerhouse who drove the show like a freight train. Jerry Sheff on bass, whose fingers found melodies where others just found rhythm. Glenn D. Hardin on piano. These guys could turn on a dime. They had to. Elvis was their leader, and he was famously unpredictable. But even his unpredictability had a pattern within the show. He might extend a song. He might talk a little longer between numbers. He might decide to sing a gospel song that wasn't on the list. But he always pulled from a known catalog. Songs they had rehearsed. Songs they knew cold. The machine had to keep running. The Colonel, his manager, made sure of that. The Colonel saw Elvis not as an artist, but as a product. A very, very valuable product. And products need quality control. They need consistency. A fan in on a Tuesday night should get the same high quality show as a high roller on a Saturday. No surprises, no risks, just pure uncut entertainment. Deliver the hits, collect the money. Just repeat. So there he was, on stage, sweating under the lights. The jumpsuit was probably getting heavy. He'd just finished a big number. The crowd was roaring. This was the moment in the show where he would catch his breath, sip some water, banter with the band. It was a planned pause, a moment for the audience to scream and for him to get ready for the next block of songs. The machine was idling for a few seconds. And then, a voice. It wasn't a microphone voice. It was a voice from the dark. A fan. A woman by the sound of it. She shouted a song title. People did this all the time. They'd yell for Hound Dog or Jailhouse Rock. Usually, he'd smile, maybe make a joke about it, and then launch right into the song he was going to play anyway. The request was just part of the noise, part of the adoration. It didn't change the plan. But this time was different. The name she shouted was not one of the old hits. It wasn't on the set list. It was a newer song, a gentle song, a song he had recorded, sure. It was a great recording, but it wasn't a concert staple. It wasn't part of the Vegas machine. They had never performed it live. Not once. They hadn't rehearsed it. There was no arrangement for the orchestra. The band didn't have a chart for it. To play it would mean stopping the machine cold. It would mean taking a huge risk right there in front of thousands of people. And he heard her. You could see it on his face. He paused. The usual charming smile flickered for a second. He looked out into the darkness where the voice came from. Something shifted. The entertainer stepped back, and the musician stepped forward. You could almost see the gears turning in his head. The Colonel's rules, the schedule, the orchestra sitting there with music for the next song on their stands. The thousands of people expecting a slick, perfect show, and then there was this one person, this one voice in the dark, asking for a piece of his soul he hadn't planned on sharing that night. He could have ignored it. It would have been the easy thing to do. The professional thing. He could have said, "We don't know that one, honey," and moved on. Nobody would have blamed him. But he didn't. He turned away from the audience. He turned to his band. He walked over to James Burton. He leaned in close. The audience couldn't hear what he was saying, but you could see the look on James's face. A little bit of surprise, a little bit of, are you serious? And then a nod. Of course, this is what they did. This is who they were. They followed their leader. Elvis then walked over to the piano. He said something to Glenn D. Hardin. Another nod. He looked at Ronnie Tutt and Jerry Sheff. He held up a hand. He was communicating with them in a silent language they all understood. The language of music, the language of trust. He was telling them, follow me. I don't know where this is going, but we're going there together. He turned back to the microphone. The crowd was buzzing now, they knew something was happening. The rhythm of the show had been broken. This was not part of the script. We don't know this song too well, he said into the mic. His voice was quiet, humble. It wasn't the voice of the king of rock and roll. It was the voice of a guy about to try something he wasn't sure he could pull off. But we'll give it a try. Think about the guts that takes. To stand on the biggest stage in the world and admit you're not prepared. To make yourself vulnerable in a place built on invincibility. It was a crack in the polished armor of the Vegas show. And through that crack, something real was about to come through. He looked back at the band, gave a nod. And then it began. There was no grand orchestral intro, no fanfare, just Glenn D. Hardin's piano, tentatively finding the opening chords. It was delicate, searching. Then Jerry Scheff's bass came in, a soft, warm pulse. Ronnie Tutt wasn't playing the thundering Vegas beat, he was just keeping time with brushes, a soft shuffle that barely whispered. And then James Burton, the master. He wasn't playing a blistering solo, he was just adding little touches, little flourishes of notes around the melody. He was listening, they were all listening, to each other, to Elvis. Elvis himself had a lyric sheet. A roadie had rushed out and put it on a music stand in front of him. He wasn't trying to hide it. He was admitting, right there, that he didn't even know all the words by heart. The king needed a cheat sheet. And somehow, that made it even more powerful. He started to sing, and the voice. It wasn't the big, booming voice he used for the showstoppers. It was a softer voice, a little unsure at first. He was feeling his way through the melody. He was reading the words, but he was also interpreting them, believing them. The song is a declaration. It's about a feeling that's so strong, so overwhelming, that it bypasses your brain and goes straight to your heart. It's about surrender, about giving in to love, to a belief, without any proof or reason. It's a hopeful, vulnerable song. And here was this man, this icon, who was supposed to be larger than life, singing it like he was discovering it for the first time. The contrast was staggering. Just moments before, he was a superhero in a cape and jumpsuit. Now, he was just a man with a guitar and a song, reading the words from a piece of paper. As he got into the second verse, you could feel the confidence growing. The band was locking in behind him. They were finding the groove. This wasn't the slick album version, this was raw. It was being created in real time. You could hear them thinking, reacting. Jerry Scheff would play a little bass run that wasn't on the record. Elvis would hear it, smile, and sing the next line with a little more energy. Ronnie Tutt would add a subtle cymbal crash to punctuate a line. It was a conversation. The audience was silent, utterly silent. The screaming had stopped, the flashbulbs were popping less. They were witnessing something rare. They were seeing the artist, not the act. They were seeing the process. The magic wasn't in the perfection, it was in the imperfection. It was in the risk. He got to the chorus, his voice soared, the power was there, but it was a different kind of power. It wasn't about shaking the walls, it was about filling the room with pure, honest emotion. He believed the words he was singing, and because he believed them, everyone in that room believed them too. So, why did he do it? Why stop a multi-million-dollar show for one song, for one fan? It wasn't just because someone asked, it was about what that request represented. In that moment, he wasn't just a product, he wasn't just the star of the show. He was a musician, and someone in the audience connected with a piece of his music so much that they had to cry out for it. It was a real human connection, and he was starving for that. Life in Vegas was a gilded cage. He was surrounded by people, but he was incredibly lonely, he was adored by millions, but it was an adoration for an image, for a legend. The man himself was often lost in the shuffle. The pressure from the Colonel, the demands of the show, the isolation of fame, it was a heavy burden. The shows, as great as they were, could become a routine. Sing this, move here, say that. It could feel like a job. A very glamorous, high-paying job, but a job nonetheless. That shouted request cut through all of it. It was a reminder of why he started in the first time. Not for the money or the fame, but for the music, for the way a song could make you feel, for the connection it could create between the singer and the listener. Stopping the show was an act of rebellion. A small one maybe, but a significant one. It was him telling the Colonel, telling the hotel, telling the world, I'm still in here. The musician is still in here. And right now, the musician wants to play this song. It was him taking back control, even for just 4 minutes. He was breaking his own rules. It was also an act of incredible generosity. To the fan who asked, can you imagine? You shout out a song not really expecting anything, and the biggest star on the planet stops everything to play it just for you. But it was also a gift to the entire audience. He was giving them a piece of the real him. Not the rehearsed, polished Elvis. The vulnerable, uncertain, trying his best Elvis. and that was a far greater gift than any scarf. And you have to think about the trust he had in his band. To turn to them and say, here's a song we've never played in a key I'm not sure of, and we're going to do it right now in front of a sold-out room. That's a level of trust that few band leaders ever have. He knew they were that good. He knew they would have his back. And they did. They built a beautiful, fragile musical structure around him, live on a high wire with no safety net. The performance wasn't perfect. There were a few hesitations, a slightly flubbed chord here or there. He looked at the lyric sheet a lot, but none of that mattered. In fact, it's what made it so legendary. Their bootleg recordings of that night became holy grails for fans, because you can hear the truth in it. You can hear the risk. You can hear the birth of a performance. When the song ended, there was a moment of stunned silence. And then, the room erupted. The applause was different from the applause before. It was deeper. It wasn't just for the hit song. It was for the man. It was for the moment. It was a thank you. A thank you for taking a chance. A thank you for being real. He just smiled. A genuine tired smile. He had stepped outside the machine, and for a few minutes, he had just been a singer with his band, playing a song for some people who wanted to hear it. It was that simple, and that profound. So what made him do it? Maybe he was bored. Maybe he was feeling trapped by the slickness of his own show. Maybe he wanted to prove to himself as much as to anyone else that he could still be spontaneous. That the kid from Memphis who loved music more than anything was still in there, somewhere inside the diamond-studded jumpsuit. He did it because for a moment, one person's desire for a song was more important than the entire machinery of stardom. He did it because he was an artist, and artists need to feel, they need to connect. They need to take risks. That night, the request from the dark wasn't an interruption to the show. It became the whole point of the show. It was the moment that King remembered what it was like to just be a musician. The song was I Just Can't Help Believin'.